Marcus Camby is a what-if player as much as he is a forgotten player. His explosive, high-flying, energy-filled play made him one of the most exciting players in the league during his early years. Unfortunately, his body made him one of the most unavailable players during those years. He showed everyone how dominant of a defender he was during his prime years with the Nuggets, but it always felt like a bit of a tease, because fans knew how much better he could be if he hadn't lost so much of his athleticism that made him so entertaining before. Nonetheless, he carved out a career that lasted over 15 years and played a significant role in nearly every season of his career. Marcus Camby truly needs to be recognized for how good of a defender he was, even if it was a limited sample, because even though he played at least 70 games in a season only 4 times, he still finished his career 12th all-time in blocks, which is mind-blowing. Sadly, defense tends to be forgotten quicker, so today we're going to remember one of the greatest to ever do it, Marcus Camby. Marcus Camby began his high school career at Conrad High School in West Hartford, Connecticut, but would transfer to Hartford Public High School 5 games into his junior year, and therefore he had to sit out the remainder of the season due to transfer rules. But Camby showed he was worth the wait in his senior season, as he averaged 27, 11, and 8, and 8 blocks, while leading his team to a 27-0 record and the state title, while being a Parade All-American and the Gatorade Player of the Year. Camby decided to attend the University of Massachusetts, where he would be coached by a young John Calipari. Camby would also join forces with UMass sophomore forward Lou Rowe to eventually form one of the best front courts in the nation during their time there. Camby played a productive 6th-man role in his freshman season and helped the team go 28-7 and reach the tournament, where as a 2 seed, they would shockingly be upset by the 10 seed Maryland Terrapins and their star freshman, Joe Smith, in the second round. Camby would have a phenomenal game, as he had 32 points and 10 boards on 65% shooting. And for the season, Camby would average about 10 points, 6.5 rebounds, and a dominant 3.6 blocks per game, as he would be named to the Atlantic 10 Conference 3rd team and Conference Rookie of the Year. Camby's sophomore season saw the Minutemen improve on last season and go 29-5, which included an Elite 8 performance, where they would lose to Oklahoma State, a game in which Camby struggled versus OSU star Bryant Reeves, as Camby finished with 6 points and 4 boards on 20% shooting. Camby's regular season was much more impressive, as him and Rowe were both first-team all-conference selections, and Camby averaged nearly 14 points, 6 rebounds, and 3.5 blocks on 55% shooting. Rowe graduated and went to the NBA, so it was completely Camby's team going into the 96 season. One might think that with the loss of Rowe, the team may take a step back, but instead, they made school history, as they went 35-2 and went all the way to the Final Four, before losing to eventual national champion and an absolutely stacked Kentucky team that had an unfair amount of future NBA talent on the roster. Camby would have a great game, with 25 points on 50% shooting and a ridiculous 8 blocks, but it wasn't enough. And on the year, Camby put up averages of 20.5 points, about 8 rebounds, and nearly 4 blocks per game, which were all career highs. Camby's efforts earned him many accolades, including the Naismith and Wooden Awards, and being named First Team All-Conference as well as First Team All-American. Camby would leave school early and declare for the draft, leaving UMass as the program's all-time leader in career and single-season blocks. Around the time of the draft, reports came out that Camby had accepted money and gifts from multiple agents during the 96 season. This resulted in UMass being stripped of their Final Four appearance. In the summer after his rookie season, Camby would pledge to pay the school the $151,000 in revenue which the program had to return after their Final Four berth was stripped in installments. Camby would become the highest UMass draft pick of all time when he was picked 2nd overall by the second-year expansion Toronto Raptors in the legendary 1996 NBA draft. The Raptors had drafted who they thought would be their point guard of the future the previous year in Damon Stoudemire, and now had their guy in Camby to man the middle and form an inside-outside duo for years to come. 97 would be a year of understandable growing pains for both Camby and the Raptors. Camby would be hampered with injuries throughout the year, which unfortunately was foreshadowing for Camby's career, as he would only play in 63 games, starting 38 of them, as the Raptors finished 30-52 and missed the playoffs. There were some individual bright spots for Camby this season, as he had a 9-block game versus Phoenix on February 1st, and he would also have his top 2 scoring performances of his entire career, with 37 versus Atlanta on March 23rd and 36 versus the Sixers on March 18th. For the year, Camby would average about 15 points, 6.5 rebounds, and 2 blocks per game, while being selected to the All-Rookie First Team. The Raptors picked up a raw high schooler in the 97 draft named Tracy McGrady as another piece to put with Stoudemire and Camby, and the future was looking bright. However, the team's executive vice president, Isaiah Thomas, resigned from the team on November 20th due to disagreements with management over future direction of the team. This doesn't seem like it should affect the team too much, but almost immediately after Thomas's resignation, Stoudemire demanded a trade. Stoudemire already hadn't been having a great year for the team up to that point, but clearly he was playing in a place he didn't want, so his play really hurt the team. But Stoudemire got his wish on February 13th as he was traded to Portland, with the main returning piece being Kenny Anderson. But Anderson did not want to play in Toronto and never suited up for them. Camby was hampered by injuries again as he played just 63 games for the second straight year, and the Raptors were awful at 16-66. The Raptors also hired coach Butch Carter to replace Darrell Walker mid-season, and as we'll see shortly, Camby ended up not being a fan of him. Overall, Camby would average about 12 points, 7.5 rebounds, but he would also average 3.7 blocks per game, which led the league, including a career-high 11 blocks in an April 14th game versus New Jersey. Camby was giving glimpses of his defensive potential, but his durability was a major concern. And McGrady also showed a bit of promise, but he was still very raw and developing. One day after the 98 NBA draft, the Raptors traded Camby to the Knicks for Charles Oakley, as the Raptors likely wanted a veteran and an enforcer to be around McGrady and their prized rookie Vince Carter, while the Knicks needed someone to take some of the load off of a 36-year-old Patrick Ewing. This was a lockout-shortened season, and Camby was able to play 46 out of 50 games as part of a deep rotation. The Knicks finished 27-23 and got into the playoffs as an 8 seed, where they would go on a Cinderella run and become the only 8 seed in NBA history to make the NBA Finals. This run included memorable moments, like an Allen Houston game winner in the final seconds of the first-round series deciding Game 5 versus Miami, as well as Larry Johnson's 4-point play to give the Knicks the lead and eventually the win against Indiana in Game 3 of the Eastern Conference Finals. This would be Camby's first playoffs, and he'd be productive within his role, until a nagging Achilles injury that Ewing had been battling through knocked him out of the playoffs after Game 2 of the Eastern Conference Finals. Camby would go on to average a double-double in that series, including scoring his playoff career high of 21 in Games 3 and 5, and adding a playoff career high 6 blocks in Game 5. But David Robinson and Tim Duncan would be too much for Camby and the Knicks, as they lost the finals in 5 games. For the regular season, Camby would average about 7 points, 5.5 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks per game. The Knicks had a surprising 2000 season, as with the return of Ewing and their swingman duo of Houston and Latrell Sprewell, they went 50-32. However, Camby would only play 59 games, but he'd be quite effective in the 59 he played. The Knicks made it back to the playoffs and were slated to play Camby's former team, the Raptors, who were still being coached by Butch Carter. And you'd think this would be a time where players would be focused and locked in for playoff basketball, but a day before Game 1, Camby came home to a lawsuit which had been filed against him by Carter, claiming defamation due to some prior statements Camby had made, calling Carter a liar because he had reportedly promised Camby the team was going to build around him after the Stoudemire trade. However, Camby was then traded soon after. Maybe this affected Camby, as he only averaged about 7 points on 40% shooting in the first round series. But the Knicks still swept the Raptors, and made it back to the Eastern Conference Finals, but this time would lose to Indiana. This was an overall playoffs that saw Camby struggle and produce nowhere close to what he had done the previous year. But he would have a 6-block Game 3 in the second round versus Miami. And for the regular season, Camby averaged about 10 points, 8 rebounds, and 2 blocks per game. The 2001 season started without the Knicks pillar in the middle for the past 15 years, as Ewing had been traded to the Sonics in the offseason, meaning Camby was a starter for the first time since 1988. Camby played well, averaging a double-double on over 52% shooting. But once again, he was hampered by injuries and played in only 63 games. But 5 of those missed games were due to suspension, as there was an incident on January 15th when Camby tried to retaliate on the Spurs' Danny Ferry for smacking him in the face while running up court during a blowout. Camby would embarrassingly slip as he tried to throw a punch at Ferry, which Ferry ducked out of, and would accidentally headbutt Knicks head coach Jeff Van Gundy, who was stepping in to stop the fight between 2 men twice his size, as he apparently loved to do. But this was out of character for the mild-mannered Camby. But he may have been trying to show that he isn't a pushover, as his career had seen him criticized for being unaggressive to the point that the Raptors played a baby crying over the PA when he checked in for a game. The Knicks finished 48-34 and made the playoffs to face the Raptors for the second straight year, but this time the Raptors beat the Knicks in 5, as Camby averaged just 6 points and 8 rebounds on less than 39% shooting. However, Camby's performance is understandable, as after he had an 18-rebound, 4-block performance in a Game 1 win, Troy Crooms broke into the Camby's family home and assaulted his sister and held his entire family hostage at knife point. This tragic event clearly took precedence over a basketball game, and Camby was likely struggling mentally throughout the remainder of the series. For the season, Camby would average about 12 points, 11.5 rebounds, and 2 blocks per game. As had become customary for Camby by this point, he was injured throughout the 02 season and only played in 29 games, the lowest total of his career up to that point. And without Camby's defense and inside presence, the Knicks went 30-52 and missed the playoffs for the first time since 1987. And for the season, Camby averaged about 11 points, 11 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks per game. Camby would be traded on draft night along with Mark Jackson and the 7th pick Nene Hilario to the Nuggets for Antonio McDyess and 25th pick Frank Williams. Camby would again play only 29 games in the 03 season as he underwent hip surgery for the same injury that had plagued him in New York the previous year, an injury which he accused the Knicks of misdiagnosing and mistreating. Even if he would have been healthy, the Nuggets were a really bad team, but without Camby, they finished the season 17-65 and missed the playoffs. Camby would finish with averages of about 7.5 points, 7 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks per game. The Nuggets' horrible finish got them a high draft pick, and while they didn't win the LeBron James sweepstakes, they got one of the best consolation prizes in Carmelo Anthony. And with the offensive contributions of Anthony, who I still think should have won Rookie of the Year, and the defensive presence of a healthy Camby who played in a career-high 72 games, the Nuggets improved to 43-39 and made the playoffs, where they would face the Timberwolves, who would beat the inexperienced Nuggets in 5. A series that saw Camby be relatively effective and productive. But the Nuggets were hurt by the lack of production from Anthony, as he averaged 6 less points per game than he did in the regular season. But the team did get some solid contributions by a couple of veterans. And for the regular season, Camby would average about 8.5 points, 10 rebounds, and 2.5 blocks per game. The 2005 season began the best 4-year stretch of Camby's career. Denver acquired all-star forward Kenyon Martin from New Jersey in a sign-and-trade to strengthen the front court. Camby's games played would dip a bit to 66 this season, but the Nuggets would still improve to 49-33 and face the Spurs in the first round, who beat them in 5, in a series where Camby would average a double-double and over 3 blocks per game. But his below 42% shooting is not what you want from your starting center. On the regular season, Camby would average about 10 points, 10 boards, and 3 blocks per game, and be selected to the all-defensive second team. The Nuggets won 5 less games in 2006, finishing 44-38, but the Nuggets were missing their frontcourt duo of Camby and Martin for a lot of the season, as they only played 56 games each. The Nuggets' record was still good enough to get them into the playoffs, where they faced Kobe Bryant and the Lakers, and for the 3rd year in a row, were eliminated in 5 games in the first round. Camby again averaged a double-double and about 3 blocks for the series, but again shot below 42%. And for the regular season, Camby would average about 13 points, 12 rebounds, and lead the league with 3.3 blocks per game, and again be voted to the all-defensive second team. The 2007 season saw the Nuggets fill a much-needed void in adding more offensive firepower to the team. An offseason trade brought over Hornets swingman J.R. Smith, who played an effective bench role, averaging 13 a game. But then, on December 19th, the Nuggets traded for former MVP Allen Iverson, giving the Nuggets the NBA's 2 leading scorers at the time, as Anthony was first and Iverson was second. Camby also played in 70 games and won Defensive Player of the Year, as the Nuggets finished 45-37, where they played the Spurs in the first round and were again eliminated in 5 games. Camby didn't shoot well in this series, but he played a great defensive series, averaging nearly 15 rebounds and over 3 blocks. Surprisingly, Iverson performed poorly in this series, and did not give the Nuggets the level of scoring they were hoping for. For the regular season, Camby averaged about 11 points, 11.5 rebounds, and a league-leading 3.3 blocks per game, while earning a first-team all-defense spot to go along with his Defensive Player of the Year. 2008 was Camby's healthiest season, as he would play 79 games, and we would also get a full season of the Anthony Iverson experiment, and they both averaged over 25 on at least 45% shooting as the Nuggets won 50 games and met the Lakers in the first round. This time, they wouldn't lose in 5 games, as they would be swept in 4, in a series where Anthony was the one struggling. One bright spot would be the play of J.R. Smith, as he was a scoring machine in this series. Camby would not play well offensively, and he would average only 3 points while shooting under 24%, but his 13 rebounds and 3 blocks per game kept him on the floor during the playoffs. For the year, Camby averaged about 9 points, a career-high 13 rebounds, and 3.6 blocks a game to again lead the league and again be voted first team all-defense. Camby was traded to the Clippers in the offseason, a trade that Camby was unhappy about, as he felt he gave everything to the Nuggets and was left in the dark until he was just traded away. As he would say, "I thought I had done everything possible that I could do with that team, and just tried to go about things the right way. I just thought the way they went about it was classless. They didn't let me know anything." Camby joined a young and rebuilding Clippers team as a veteran presence, where he would join Baron Davis and a rookie Eric Gordon, and later be joined by Zach Randolph, who came over in a trade from New York. But this was not a good team, as Camby played power forward alongside Chris Kaman until Kaman went down with an injury, forcing Camby to center and Randolph to power forward. Camby saw his durability issues return, as he played just 62 games, but would shoot over 51%, which was his highest percentage since 2001. The team went 19-63 and obviously missed the playoffs, as Camby was just one of many players who struggled with injuries this season. And for the regular season, Camby would average about 10 points, 11 rebounds, and 2 blocks per game. A bright spot of this season would be that Camby pulled down a career-high 27 rebounds on December 17th versus Chicago. Camby began the 2010 season with LA, but would be traded to Portland on February 16th, joining one of the biggest what-ifs in NBA history, and being reunited with his former Denver point guard. A big reason for this trade was due to a season-ending injury to Portland big man Greg Oden, and Camby helped the Blazers reach the playoffs, where they would lose to Phoenix in 6 games, in a series where Brandon Roy was only able to play 3 games due to injury, and averaged under 10 points in those 3 games. Camby was a solid contributor in this series, as he again averaged over 10 rebounds, but saw his block numbers go way down, as he averaged just over 1 per game. Over the entire regular season, in an impressive 74 games played, Camby would average about 7.5 points, 12 rebounds, and 2 blocks per game. Camby would spend the entire 2011 season with the Blazers, but their once promising trio was no more, as Oden would miss the entire season, and Roy only managed 47 games over the regular season. Camby also struggled to stay healthy, playing in just 59 games, but the Blazers would still manage 48 wins and would face Dallas in the first round. The Blazers lost in 6 games, but this series became memorable for Brandon Roy giving the fans one last great performance when he scored 24 off the bench, including 18 in the fourth quarter and a go-ahead basket with under a minute left to will the Blazers to a Game 4 win in a game that they trailed 67-49 going into the fourth quarter. Camby's playoff production continued to decline, as he averaged under 10 rebounds in a postseason for the first time since 2001. For the regular season, Camby averaged about 4.5 points, 10.5 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks per game. Camby began the 2012 season with Portland, but was traded to Houston at the trade deadline, to again be a veteran presence on a young team with their backcourt of Kevin Martin and Kyle Lowry. Houston finished with a 34-32 record in the lockout-shortened season, but missed the playoffs. And for the season, Camby was healthy as he played in 59 out of 66 games and averaged about 5 points, 9 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks per game. Camby's last season would be in a reserve role in a return to New York after he was traded to the Knicks in the offseason, where he would be reunited with some other old Denver teammates and would join a fellow former Defensive Player of the Year. But Camby missed most of the season with a foot injury, playing in just 24 games. The Knicks won 54 games and made the playoffs, where they lost to the Pacers in the second round. This marked the first time Camby made it past the first round since 2000. But Camby's role in the playoffs was virtually non-existent, as he played in only 3 games, averaging a single minute of action. Camby's regular season stats in his limited role looked like about 2 points, 3.5 rebounds, and half a block per game. In the offseason, Camby would be traded to the Raptors, bought out, signed by the Rockets, and then waived before the season started, and he wouldn't play in the NBA again. So Camby lasted in the league for a long time, as he hustled and seemed to be liked by teammates and coaches for the most part. He also played elite defense, and there's always a spot on the team for an elite defender. But with that being said, why isn't he talked about as much when you talk about the great defenders of the 21st century, or the great big man defenders overall? I feel like the answer is pretty clear, in that you just didn't see enough of him. In a 17-year career, he only played 70 or more games 4 times. It's a shame because his prime in Denver, when he was relatively healthy, showed how great he could be defensively, and that he could contribute on the offensive end too. And that was at a time where he had already been robbed of some of his explosion and quickness. So you can't help but wonder what a healthy Camby would have looked like in Toronto or New York, as athletic as he was. As his emphatic style of defense and use of his athleticism and length allowed him to make some insane defensive plays. And if that athleticism could have been present when his defensive IQ was improved in his later years, who knows how dominant he could have been. I feel like Camby still got a bad rap in his early years, as some of the early controversies and tragedies he dealt with early in his career, mixed with an inability to stay healthy that he couldn't control, must have took a huge toll on him, as he was a top 2 pick with huge expectations, that he showed he could fulfill, but that his body did not allow him to. But when it comes to Marcus Camby, he is definitely a forgotten player. But just as much a what if as he is forgotten, as I have no doubt in my mind that if he could have stayed healthy, we would be talking about Marcus Camby as an all-time great defender, whose name would have been high on the all-time rebound and blocks lists. But that's all I got for Marcus Camby. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, maybe you'll like this one about his former teammate in New York. Or maybe this one about the guy that dropped 40 on his Nuggets in the 04 playoffs. Remember to subscribe for more videos like this one. See you next time.